I get itchy staring at a list of scanners, trying to figure out which one actually saves you time and money instead of just adding another piece of equipment that sits in a drawer. You don't want to throw cash at a model that jams every other page or forces you to wrestle with drivers that won't talk to your PC. You want something that fits your workflow, whether you're digitizing a stack of contracts for a small business or just turning a handful of family photos into PDFs. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Canon Imageformula DR9050C is marketed as a high-capacity, 24-bit color sheet-fed scanner. On paper, that sounds like a solid middle ground between a cheap consumer scanner and an industrial-grade document processor. The 24-bit color depth means it can capture subtle color variations, which is handy if you're scanning anything beyond plain black and white documents. Think marketing flyers, colored invoices, or old printed photos that need a faithful digital copy. That's the kind of detail that matters when you're trying to preserve the original look for archival or client presentations. But the real question is whether that promise translates into day-to-day usefulness. The first thing I looked at was the average rating, just 2 stars out of 5 from over 1,000 reviewers. That's a red flag, especially when you consider the price point Canon usually commands in this segment. A low rating across such a large sample suggests systematic problems rather than a handful of isolated complaints. In other words, the scanner isn't just a niche disappointment, it's something that many people have struggled with. Who should consider buying the DR9050C? If you run a small to mid-size office that processes the steady flow of color documents, think marketing agencies that need to digitize proof prints, or a design studio that scans artwork for client review, the combination of a decent feeder capacity and true color scanning could be useful. The scanner's sheet-fed design means you can load a stack and let it run unattended, freeing you up to focus on other tasks. For businesses that need to keep an electronic record of colored invoices, receipts, or product catalogs, that 24-bit depth prevents the washed-out look you sometimes get from cheaper 8-bit or 16-bit models. On the other hand, if you're a home user who mainly scans black and white paperwork, receipts, or occasional photos, you're probably better off with a more modest flatbed model. Those tend to have fewer moving parts, which translates to fewer jams and a lower chance of driver headaches. The DR9050CS ADF, automatic document feeder, is overkill if you only ever scan a few pages at a time, and the extra cost isn't justified when the reliability concerns are already on the table. Let's talk about practical strengths. First, the color depth is genuinely useful for preserving nuance. If you're digitizing a client's printed brochure that uses spot colors or gradients, a 24-bit scanner captures those subtleties better than many entry-level alternatives. Second, the feeder can handle a decent volume enough to keep a small office from constantly reloading paper. In a scenario where you have to scan a stack of 200 employee contracts overnight, the feeder lets you set the machine and walk away, which is a real time saver compared to manually feeding each sheet. Now for the practical weaknesses. These are where the low rating really shows up. The most common pain point reported by users is paper jams. Because the feeder relies on a series of rollers and a relatively narrow path, even a slightly curled page, or a sheet with a tiny tear, can cause the scanner to stop mid-batch. When that happens, you're forced to open the machine, clear the jam, and hope the issue doesn't repeat. In a high-volume setting, that downtime can add up quickly. Another issue that keeps popping up in discussions is driver compatibility. The DR9050C ships with Canon's own scanning software, but many Windows and macOS users have found that the drivers don't play nicely with newer operating system updates. That translates to random error messages, unrecognized devices, or the scanner simply refusing to start a job. If you rely on third-party software like Adobe Acrobat or a document management system, you may need to spend additional time tweaking settings or even rolling back OS updates, which is a hidden cost most people don't anticipate. A third, subtler drawback is the lack of advanced workflow features. Modern office scanners often come with built-in OCR, optical character recognition that can automatically turn scanned pages into searchable PDFs, or with network connectivity that lets multiple users share a single device without a dedicated workstation. The DR9050C sticks to the basic scan and save, so you'll likely need extra software if you want those higher-level capabilities. For a business that expects to integrate scanning into a larger digital filing system, that extra step could be a deal-breaker. What about the actual value proposition? If you break down the price, you're paying for a scanner that sits somewhere between a consumer flatbed and an enterprise feeder. The color depth and feeder capacity justify a mid-range price tag, but the reliability and software